Put your seatbelts on and get ready for the ride. We're the freaking New York Jets, so we're built for this shit.
Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Thursday, July 3rd. Hopefully everybody's having a good day so far today. This is episode 564 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me. For those tuning in on YouTube, make sure to please like and subscribe. Of course, appreciate all of those tuning in on all the different audio podcast platforms. And today we're breaking down 3 free agents that were linked to the New York Jets in a recent Sports Illustrated article. 2 coming on the defensive side of the football and 1 coming on the offensive side of the football. We will break down all 3 of these players and if they're realistic and good fits for this New York Jets team for the upcoming 2025 season. As always, though, before we begin, we've got to tell you about our podcast partners, starting with our friends over at BetUS, America's favorite online sportsbook. If you want to get in on any of the sports betting action, check out BetUS and use my link in the description of this video to get a 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. Also, our friends over at SeatGeek. If you want any of the hottest tickets in sports or entertainment, check out SeatGeek and use promo code BUBSONSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. And also make sure check out our friends over at Huga House. If you want any of their awesome collection of hats, t-shirts, sweatshirts, they've got some awesome summer arrivals. Check them out and use code BUBS for 15% off any purchase and get yourself some Huga House swag. So here we go, episode 564. Thank you, as always, for joining me here on a Thursday program. It is 4th of July Eve here today on the podcast, and I wanted to break down 3 free agents that were linked to the New York Jets in a recent Sports Illustrated article written by Patrick McAvoy. He listed 3 veteran options for the Jets to target here before the season begins, and all 3 options, 2 of them would actually fit one area of need. The other one would fit potentially an area of need that's been talked about a lot on the offensive side of the football, coming at receiver, which we'll touch on a little bit later on. But we'll just go in order of the way they were listed. The first 2 that he listed were edge rushers. And it's interesting, the edge position for the Jets is an interesting spot. And I could definitely see a world and definitely understand the perspective and where people are coming from. Myself, I've said it a lot in terms of the Jets potentially going out and adding edge depth to this roster. And I know when you look at the team as a whole right now, and you look at this edge room when they're fully healthy, and you look at your 2 pieces in Will McDonald and Jermaine Johnson, you like those 2 guys a lot. Will McDonald coming off of a big double-digit sack season in year number 2, took a big jump. Looking forward to what he can do in year 3. But when you look at Jermaine Johnson coming off the torn Achilles, there's a real chance, real possibility that he's going to take a couple weeks to get back fully into stride. I don't think you're going to expect Jermaine Johnson to go out there right away in week 1 and be 100% back to himself. And that is where it opens up a door for a potential veteran signing here, because you look at the rest of this edge room and you have a rookie in Tyler Barron. You have, last year's UDFA and Eric Watts didn't do a whole lot. You brought in Rashad Weaver, who hasn't done much at all in his NFL career, very minimal playing time across the couple teams, most notably the Tennessee Titans. Michael Clemens is a guy that I think all Jet fans wish was not on this roster right now. You have a guy in Braden McGregor who was one of the 3 UDFAs to make it last year on that defensive line, didn't do a whole lot. So there is some unknowns behind Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald. And in the event and the scenario where Jermaine Johnson starts the season, takes him a couple weeks to get fully into his groove, that opens up the door here for the Jets to go out and potentially add a veteran with a track record that you know what you're going to get to kind of limit and block some of those questions behind Jermaine and Will McDonald, where it's a bunch of young guys and a few guys that haven't done a whole lot in their career. Somebody like a Michael Clemens has only gotten worse. Rashad Weaver, very minimal playing time throughout his career. Not necessarily guys that you want to rely on early in the year to make plays. So the two names that he listed will go in order, like I said, and two options. One of them I think is probably maybe even a little bit more realistic just because of the connection with Aaron Glenn. But the first one here, Za'Darius Smith. Now, he'll be 32 years old. He's 32 years old right now. He'll be 33 by week 1. So definitely, right, veteran, north of 30. That's the biggest question with all of these guys, and that is the big thing that I wanted to put out there was these are veteran free agent options. Are the Jets going to be willing to get into training camp, see they have a needed edge behind your two starters in Jermaine and Will McDonald, come in and be rotational pieces, right? Are they going to be willing? How willing are they going to be to go and after a guy that's north of 30? Go after a couple of these players that are north of 30. Just because that's not been the approach, as we know, one of the youngest teams in the NFL that they've taken so far. More on Za'Darius Smith, though. 10 seasons, entering 11th year in the NFL. Again, 33 years old by week 1. 4 years in Baltimore, spent 3 with Green Bay, 1 with Minnesota, spent a year and a half with Cleveland halfway through last year with all the injuries that Detroit was going to. He was dealt to the Lions, spent the second half of that season with them after the deadline, and was a productive player. And the reason Za'Darius Smith is an interesting name to watch and look for is the connection with Aaron Glenn, right? Last year with the Lions, coming over at the deadline, played 8 games with the team, and was productive in those 8 games. He had 4 sacks, 12 tackles in those 8 appearances. And you look at his numbers as a whole last year, 17 games played, 35 tackles, 9 sacks, which was tied for 18th in the NFL, so top 20. 9 tackles for loss, 17 quarterback hits, 63 pressures, and 46 quarterback hurries on top of 18 run stops. He was 10th in the NFL in pressures and 6th in the NFL in hurries. So even though it was his age 32 season and he was dealt halfway through, spent the season with 2 different teams, although played all 17 games, right? 9 with Cleveland, 8 with Detroit. He was still a productive player and came into Detroit and stepped in and played a big role for that team down the stretch when they desperately needed it with some of the injuries to key guys, of course, like Aiden Hutchinson, and has familiarity with Glenn. He's a name to look for, I think. 3-time Pro Bowler, 2nd-team All-Pro. You look at some of his other numbers last year, graded out, solid, 76.5 pass rush grade, which was 21st. Year prior, he was 10th in pass rush grade, 12th in pass rush grade going back to 2022. Pass rushing has always been his, I guess, how do I want to word it? His strength. There it is. I was losing the word for a second. That's been his strength. The next guy I'm going to talk about a little bit more of your run stopper at this point in his career. But in terms of your rotational pass rusher and get home to the quarterback consistently in the limited snaps that he could play, Za'Darius Smith could certainly play that role. In his career, 69 sacks, 333 total tackles, 140 games played, 85 tackles for loss, 173 quarterback hits, and 306 quarterback hurries. I think what's notable about Za'Darius Smith and what makes him, to me, an intriguing option, somebody that can come in for a season here and play a role on a cheap 1-year deal, is the numbers, like I said, have been pretty close to each other. You go back the last 3 years, he's still been a consistent player, right? That's the biggest thing you look at for these older players. Have they been declining? Are they still, maybe not the player he was 5-6 years ago, but can he still be a productive player, right? A lot of times you look at a guy, 2022 is great, 2023 falls off, 2024 continues to fall off, and then you're banking on complete unknown in 2025. Za'Darius Smith, that hasn't been the case. When you break down some more further numbers with Za'Darius Smith, 2022, he had 78 pressures, which was 4th, and he was 2nd in hurries, with 53. Fast forward to the 2023 season, 60 pressures was 20th, 40 hurries was 20th. So it was still top 20, but actually took a bit of a step back. And then last year was back up, 63 pressures, 10th, 46 hurries, 6th. So the hurries, the pressures, they've all been in that 50-40 range and that 60-70 range consistency. And I think you bring him in that similar role. He understands Glenn's defense, knows the scheme. If you're willing to go out and take a player, the rare player here that the Jets would target that's over 30, I would be okay with somebody like an Za'Darius Smith. You want to throw Jadeveon Clowney out there as well. He is not the other name that's on this list, but he's somebody else that you could potentially go after. That would be a name that I'm okay with, right? I'm not a big fan of the Amari Cooper possibility. I'm not. But Za'Darius Smith's a guy that I can understand it. And when you look at the numbers and you look at how he fits here, he's one of those players that would be a north of 30 signing that would make sense and I think could help the team. Some of these other north of 30 signings, probably not. So that's Za'Darius Smith. Now on to the next edge rusher that they listed was Preston Smith. 32 years old. He'll be 33 in November, so entering age 32, 33 season. Similar to Smith, 10 years in the NFL, entering his 11th, 4 with Washington, spent 6.5 with the Green Bay Packers, and then last year was dealt halfway through the year to the Pittsburgh Steelers, where he played 8 games as well, similar to Za'Darius Smith with the Detroit Lions halfway through the 2024 campaign. Again, another edge depth option for this team. Primarily was a rotational role last year. In his 9 games with Green Bay and in his 8 games with Pittsburgh, the snap counts and the role that he played would probably be similar to what he would do here in a way. Last year, he had 261 pass rush snaps, 182 run defense snaps, 469 snaps as a whole. And in those snaps, those came across, of course, the 17 games played. 32 total tackles, 4.5 sacks, 5 tackles for loss, 6 quarterback hits. He had 18 pressures, 12 quarterback hurries, 14 run stops, and 32 run stops the year prior. So like I said, more of your, at this point in his career, not necessarily your rotational, like get home pass rusher type of player. That's more of Za'Darius Smith at this point in his career. But I would say with Preston Smith, the run defense sticks out to me last year as someone, we talk a lot about the gap integrity. Jets last year struggled with that. Preston Smith was somebody that did a good job of that last year from a run defense perspective, right? 14 run stops in his rotational role. And in the year prior, 32 run stops, which was even in a bigger role. Career stats, 163 games played, 442 tackles, 7.5 sacks, 74 tackles for loss, 157 quarterback hits, and 250 hurries in his career. I talk a lot about the run stops, and I think what makes Preston Smith an interesting name too, and I guess you want to throw Za'Darius Smith in there as well. Preston Smith, a little bit of your bigger, more size than a Will McDonald, right? Will McDonald's more of your quicker, more bendy athletic guy. Preston Smith's more that edge rusher with more size, not as much speed off the edge, the bendy athleticism, but a little bit more bulky, a little bit bigger size-wise, and can kind of complement a little bit with Will McDonald in the event he was a part of this team, if that makes sense. He's been top 20 in run stops the last couple of years. 2022, he was 16th. 2023, he was 17th. Last year was 14th, but part of that was, again, the rotational role, and you'd be bringing him in that rotational role, and if that's what you got out of him, I think you'd be okay with that on a pretty cheap contract, 1-year deal for Preston Smith to provide some depth for this team. So Preston Smith's another name that the Jets were linked to here. Za'Darius Smith, to me, bit better, probably your number 1 in my opinion. And then Preston Smith would be behind him. I also just think Za'Darius Smith, just the fact that he had some experience last year with Glenn, also plays a role in all this. But two options there. One more player that was listed here, I'll be honest, I don't really like. And I understand Preston Smith, understand Za'Darius Smith. The other player that was listed here that I'm not really totally on board with just because of how bad last year was Tyler Boyd. 30 years old. He'll be 31 in November. And I get the quarterback play that Tyler Boyd was dealing with last year, but this was a guy that went into Tennessee and just completely fell off a cliff. And to me, you look at Tyler Boyd over the last 3 seasons, he kind of falls under that category, right? We just talked about it earlier. Za'Darius Smith, to me, is still a productive player even at 33 years old. Preston Smith, same thing. Tyler Boyd, to me, is not aging well at all. You look at his last 3 seasons, the numbers have just dropped consistently from a yards perspective, catch perspective. Last year was a career worst season for him. He played 16 of a possible 17 games, right? This is a guy last year that had 39 catches for 390 yards, no touchdowns. No touchdowns. First year in Tennessee. He spent 8 years with Cincinnati, 1 with the Titans, of course. He'll be 31 in November. I get the idea of another veteran and needing help in this wide receiver room, but right now, what is the drop-off to me when you look at Tyler Boyd? How much better is a Tyler Boyd, what he got out of what he was in Tennessee last year? How big of a difference will that be to, let's say, a Josh Reynolds, right? Or somebody else that may, like, to me, even Al Lazard at this point. That's how lack of production there was for Tyler Boyd last year. And he had under 40 catches. That's the first time he did that since 2017. And there's an asterisk to that because 2017, he only played 10 games. It was also just year number 2 for him. This is year number 9. Those seasons should not be happening or entering year 10. Last year was year number 9. I think if you're going to go the veteran receiver route, I've always said Keenan Allen would be my preferred option. I don't love Amari Cooper, and I'm not a huge Tyler Boyd guy either in this instance. Now, look, you look at his 2023 numbers, 67 receptions, 667 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's where the drop-off was, right? And then you even look at the year prior, he has dropped each year the last 4 years in yards. He went 841 in 2020, 828 in 2021, 762 in 2022, 667 in 2023, and in 2024 was 390. And to me, I just don't think this is number one realistic because the Jets aren't going to get a guy that, number one, north of 30 affects it, but number 2, production's consistently dropped off, right? And number 3, I think the Jets have a lot more belief in this receiver room. I think they really believe they can coach some of these guys up. If they really go out there, there's no way Tyler Boyd is, to me, going to impress them more than a Keenan Allen or an Amari Cooper. Just based off those guys' track record, too, is more impressive. And I get Boyd throughout his career, right? 6,390 yards. He's had 2 1,000-yard seasons, 31 touchdowns. He's only had 24 drops in his career. His drop per season is 2.6. He's got just a 4% drop rate. Very consistent. Good hands. Like, he's been that way his whole career. But the other numbers, ugly. The production itself, ugly. And then you just look at some of the way he graded out last season. He had a 60 overall PFF grade. That was the second lowest of his career. He had a 60.9 reception grade, which was the worst of his career. And I think this is something that else is interesting because the Jets value this, and I think it's a big reason why Josh Reynolds is right now emerging and was signed in the first place. But not a great blocker. Not a very willing blocker. 39.1 pass block grade last year, which was the worst of his career. Jets value blocking from the receivers as well. Boyd did not do that well last season. He graded out poorly in pretty much every area of his game. So Tyler Boyd to me is, I just don't see it happening. And he's started to drop off these last couple of years. Their production has consistently decreased. And last year felt kind of like rock bottom. where he was under 400 yards, under 40 receptions, very poor season. And I get Tennessee was awful. The quarterback situation was awful. I get all that, but I just don't see him being a player the Jets target. Za'Darius Smith and Preston Smith, sure. I could get on board with that. If I had to predict, do I think they sign those guys? Probably not. But I can get on board with it, and I would totally understand and be okay with it. Tyler Boyd, I think they could do a little bit better. So let me know what you think in the comment section down below. What are your thoughts on these three free agents that the New York Jets were linked to? Za'Darius Smith, Preston Smith, Tyler Boyd. Any of these realistic options? Do you like any of these options? Any other options you like? Let me know down in the comment section down below. You know, we've talked about Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, Jadeveon Clowney's another name if you're looking at some edge help that I know people have discussed a lot of. But wanted to break down these three names. They were in the article, recently, and thought be a good discussion point here. So appreciate your support as always. Enjoy your 4th of July tomorrow. We'll be back soon. Until next time, Jets, Jets, Jets.